In this demo, I'm going to be looking at the NTAD POE. So opening up my NTAD POE, you can see that the NTAD POE has got the following activities that needs to be completed. Firstly, activity 1. Now, activity 1, you're familiar with all of the other POEs that you have completed, and the purpose of activity 1 is to show what learning has been done from completing activity 1, part 1, part 2, and your ICE task. Having completed those 3 activities, ICE part 1, part 2, and then ICE, what is it that you have learned from those activities? So how do you give the feedback? For activity 1A, you need to submit. Now, all of these are separate documents. So one document has got submission of part 1 with the feedback, and the next document has got evidence that the feedback has been addressed and reporting on the above. In other words, you'll go back to part 1. So if I scroll and if I look at what activities were completed in part 1, in part 1, I needed to do 3 activities: the planning and deployment and installation of the server infrastructure. And then let's take an example here. Automated server installation, or WDS. Let's say, for example, I didn't get 4 out of 4 for WDS. When I did part 1 originally, I might have just taken one screenshot and I showed WDS was installed, but I did not do any configuration on WDS, or I did not do any explanation. In other words, an image needed to be installed on the WDS server, and then I needed to have shown how to deploy that image so that I can remotely install multiple Windows Server computers. So if I didn't do that, then I can show that some improvement has been made, maybe take an additional screenshot, and then explain how you would further configure WDS. So you simply take one example from any one of these activities that you've completed for part 1. For part 2, you can do exactly the same. So for part 2, what were we required to do here? There were also 3 activities, and here we were expected to implement group policy. We were expected to do storage technologies and then do some documentation. Now, let's say I lost some marks on storage technologies here because I did not correctly identify that I'm going to be using network attached storage, or I did not correctly specify how I'm going to be implementing RAID, or redundant array of inexpensive independent disks. Is there something more that I've learned since completing part 2? So you show some additional learning that has occurred since you have completed. It's not just about getting something wrong and correcting your mistake. It's about having completed part 1 or having completed part 2. Since then, what additional information have you learned that's related to that activity that you have completed? So that's what they mean by show some evidence of learning. And you do exactly the same then for your ICE activities. So for the ICE activities, for example, they give us additional instructions on what needs to be completed here. So in activity 1, which is A, B, and C, you've got 5 marks for each of them, and they count 15 marks in total, and they give us some guidelines on what needs to be done for this. Now, if I look at the POE, total POE, there's 5, 10, 15, and then 10 marks here. 25 out of the 60 marks is just to show learning that has occurred from having completed the tasks before. So you show what was done, what improvements were made, and then what you explain what is it that you have learned since then, having completed those activities. So that is for Now that's a free 25 out of 60 marks. Then for activity 2 now, we need to complete an activity, and let's look at what is the work that is required here for activity 2. Now remember also for activity 3, which is your self-evaluation, there's 2 sections to that self-evaluation, which is the questions and the table. You need both the table and you need the questions to get 10 out of 10 here. Many times students will either complete the table or they'll complete the questions and they get 5 out of 10 instead of getting 10 out of 10. So if you complete both parts of this, which is the questions, and you can't get answers from anyone else. Here, for example, you need to use your own words and explain what has happened. So that's both for the self-evaluation and then also for this activity here, part B, part C. Now, moving on to activity 2. So in activity 2 now, they say this section is a presentation and demonstration of a set of tools. No, before I get to that activity, activity 1. Activity 2 comprises of 2 activities, which is activity 1 and activity 2. So the first one is 25 marks, and then the next one is 10 marks. So let's look at what do we need to do for the 25 marks. For the 25 marks, we need to firstly, based on your learning unit and your own research, suggest a WDS SUS strategy suitable for the network scenario given above. Remember, here we are working with a college with a central office and a branch office. So they give us outlines of a document that needs to be created. So we need to write a report on how we're going to use Windows Server Update Services, or WSUS. Now, where would I find the correct information and what needs to be done? They've given us all of the different sections. Remember that your document needs to clearly have, your Word document needs to clearly have title, table of contents, summary, and report and disclaimer. Strategy, short description, the scope, what's included, not included, features and technologies, configuration, administration, maintenance, key principles, procedures, best practices. So you need to have each of these different headings and sections. And for each of these headings, you will include the relevant information and then link it to the case study. So where would I find this information on WSUS? I would go firstly to my textbook, and I would look in my textbook for WSUS. So I search for WSUS, and I do a search there. And then it says there's Windows Server Update Services. And as you can see, Windows Server Update Services, it gives me a description. What is it? It's a successor to the software update services. It's called Windows Server Update Services. Now, Windows Server Update Services enable system administrators to manage and distribute Microsoft project updates to their organization's computers. WSUS works in such a way that its infrastructure enables the downloading of updates, patches, and fixes to an organization's server. And then the server distributes the updates to other computers. And using Windows Server Update Services, system administrators can approve and cancel updates, set installation of updates on a given date, and generate reports to determine which updates for each computer are needed. The way that the organization computers do not need that way, the organization's computers do not need to refer to the Windows Update website any longer, And then they give you an example of how to install the Windows software update services here. And before this section, they speak about Windows Update, which is the website on the internet from which the server gets the updates. All right, so that's the information that's included in your textbook. The next place I'll go to look is on my Learn. So in Learn, I'll go to my module homepage and I look at the learning units. And then I'm looking for the section that describes Windows software update services, server update services. So if I go into Learning Unit 5, I can see the server update services, server update management is covered in Theme 2. And then they give me a diagram of how WSUS works. And then they give me links to articles. And one of these articles, this one here, Step 2, is going to link me to the Windows website, which will contain the complete information, containing all the information I need to answer this question. So I go in here now, there's the picture. It also asks me to draw a diagram. Now, this diagram is generic, means it applies to any network. In your example, you need to draw a diagram that's going to be specific to the case study. In other words, you're going to have one main office, and then you're going to have a branch office. You're going to indicate multiple servers that are installed for each of the different departments, and how are each of these servers going to get their updates from the Windows Server Update server, and then also connecting to the Windows Update. Now, in this diagram, we can see Windows Update is on the internet. These are the Microsoft servers on the internet. So we are connected via one server. So it's only one server that goes to the internet to get all the updates, and it downloads and keeps it on the local network. That's my WSUS server. Then all my computers now are going to get their updates from the local computer. They no longer have to go to the Windows Update internet website. As the administrator, I can control now which of the updates that I have downloaded are going to be installed on my desktop, on my server computers, on my other computers on the network, and I can schedule these updates to occur at any given time. I can also generate reports on these updates. So this diagram gives me a broad overview of how Windows Server Update Services is working. The article now that we're going to go to is going to be the link that I clicked on. So this is on Azure. Let me go and click on that link. So if I go in here and if I click on Step 2 link, see, it takes me to the Windows, the Microsoft website. So on the Microsoft website now, it tells me how to deploy Windows Server Update Services. It gives me a description that says, these are all of the steps that you need to take. So you're going to use this as a guideline, and then it's got additional articles if you need more information on each of these activities on the right-hand side. But basically, it gives me all the information that is required to answer that question. So I'll use this and I'll reference this website as my primary source of information, and then set up a strategy, and then you can look for additional sources that gives you additional guidelines. But all of the information that you require is in this article here. Going back to looking at what else is required. Right, so you will continue and you'll complete this activity 1. Activity 2 now is looking at a tutorial and demonstration. For this question, you can use PowerPoint. You are all familiar with PowerPoint, and you can record. So you can create slides for introduction, topic, explain the Windows Server configuration and tools, demonstrate how the configuration has been completed, and then make recommendations. They give us 2 topics that we can choose from. The first one is tuning and maintaining Windows Server, and the next one is Windows Server Cloud features. Now, we have information on tuning and maintaining Windows Server in your textbook. And the second topic, you'll need to do internet research. So you'll go to the Microsoft website for this one. I'm going to discuss this one here, which is already included in your textbook and on RC or on Learn as well. So if I'm looking at tuning and maintaining the server, I can go and copy this and look at my textbook. So tuning and maintaining the server. So I'm not sure why it's not searching. Oh, there we go. I used a colon there. That's why it was not searching. So I can see all of this is covered in chapter 9. So let me go to chapter 9. There's chapter 9, tuning and maintaining a Windows server. So all the information that I require for this question is in chapter 9. So I can use my textbook as the source of information for this topic here. There's all of the components that is required to answering this question. Identifying the major server hardware components. So how am I going to check that my processor, memory, disk network interfaces are performing optimally on the server? What tools am I going to be using? Performance monitor, resource monitor, task manager, performance counters, understanding the logs and alerts, etc. All the info that I need is covered in chapter 9 from my textbook. I can now go back and say, okay, I'm going to choose, they told me to choose one of the topics. The topic that I'm going to choose is tuning and maintaining because it gives me a very clear outline in my textbook, and then also on Learn. Let's see what information is there on Learn. So if I go into, I think it should be theme 1 here, introduction, server components. There's it here. So in Learning Unit 5, they covered it here. There's it here, identify major hardware components, monitoring logs and alerts. And then they give us some additional articles here on they give us some additional articles here as well that I can use as additional references. Then with regards, let's have a look at what else they had to say about tuning and maintaining. They said activity 2, right. So introduction, 2 marks, tutorial, define, explain, describe, up to 2 marks, the tutorial's topic. Adequately explain the server configuration tools, functions, configuration, how do they work, 7 marks. And then recommendations and conclusions, 1 mark for recommendation and conclusion. So you can do the first topic, or if you wish, you can do the second topic. But the first topic, we've got very clear guidelines from the textbook as to what the tools are. And then it's very easy then to put it together into a presentation. And you need to talk and complete these activities because they say for this question, presentation and demonstration of a set of tools and technologies, you're required to choose one topic. Okay, so you can choose the first topic or the second topic. You have been asked to develop training materials for a new client that has shown interest in the Windows Server infrastructure and services. Thus far, you have decided to design interactive, automated, and narrated presentations demonstrating planning, configuration, and administration of the server roles, features, tools, and technologies. Okay, and that was all very clearly covered in Chapter 9 from your textbook. And you can use PowerPoint for this presentation. You can also record your audio on that PowerPoint as we have done in previous modules. And that concludes the demonstration for your NTAD POE.